there, welcome back to another show. Today I'm talking about Peter Jackson's King Kong movie. Now, you've probably seen the trailer for Kong vs Godzilla. You've probably seen Kong Skull Island. Hopefully you've seen the original Kong, and hopefully you will have seen the King Kong 1977 with Jeff Bridges and King Kong Lives, the sequel, the terrible sequel. This is the kind of respectable remake, really. This is a direct remake of the first original film. They didn't update it the way that 1977 one did, or the way that Kong Skull Island did, which was the film that set up Godzilla vs. Kong. That trailer's amazing, the new trailer for that film looks amazing, but I'm going to talk about the Peter Jackson one. And I'm directly saying I'm talking mostly about the extended version. Like, there's the theatrical cut and the extended version. The extended version is like 20 minutes longer than theatrical, but it's actually a better version of the film. It actually feels much more... It feels like that's a film that should have been released. Just the same way as Lord of the Rings always felt that the extended versions always felt the films that should have been released. Like, Jackson tends to cut his films down really tight. Like, even though they're epics, he tends to cut them down a bit too much for me in theatrical, and then when you get extended versions, it always feels like, yeah, that's what it should have been. Because it gives a bit more time to breathe, and it gives you a bit more context to the world. And that's what I like about his films, is the world building. Because even you look back at some of his early films, like Brain Dead and Bad Taste, they always had the worlds that were really interesting, and they always had kind of slight narratives, and the narratives were basic, but you got through the world. I mean, Bad Taste is about a guy and his mum. No, that's Brain Dead. Brain Dead's about a guy and his mum, and there's a lot of zombies around. Bad Taste about alien invasion and all these a bunch of guys trying to defeat it, but it's based on non-narrative. It's just this world, and this crazy world you're dealing with. I mean, even Heavenly Creatures was about the world more than the narrative. The narrative just came in towards the end when the murders took place, but before that was world building. I think what Peter Jackson does best is the world building. And Lord of the Rings is world building into a narrative that really worked. The Hobbit, it went to a world that needed really trimmed down. I'll get to that in another video. But here we have King Kong. This was his pet project. This is a film he wanted to make before Lord of the Rings. It was cancelled because some big budget films at this time didn't do well, like Godzilla, the remake Godzilla. So they cancelled, so he went and looked for someone else to do and ended up doing Lord of the Rings. Once Lord of the Rings came out, were a massive hit. Universal, who had the rights to his project, said, "Do you want to come back and do King Kong? Like, we will finance it now if you want to do it." But enough time had passed from that monster craze, and the next Peter Jackson film was always going to be a big thing after the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So he said, "Yeah, we'll come back." I mean, I'm not sure it was a good or a bad idea at the time, because I mean, it pretty much was another Lord of the Rings level project, just after he made 3 of them, and I'm sure he was pretty tired, and I'm sure some of the defects in the film were due to the fact that it was directed by a guy who was pretty tired, because it's obvious after this film, he took a long break. He really took a long break after this film, and I think he was just exhausted. And some of the defects do feel like they were made by somebody who may, if they had some time, they could probably have stepped back and said, "No, we'll do something different." But I really like this film. But it isn't for everybody. A lot of people do not like it. It's up its own arse a lot of the time, because it's so faithful but so unfaithful at the same time. And it's obviously a film that a director wanted to make, and he's going to do what the film he wanted to make. It's one of those movies where I'm making this film and it's just for me, and I hope you like it, but it doesn't matter if you don't. So he went out and made the film. He just made the film he wanted to make, and I thought it was wonderful, but it was self-indulgent. When you watch the film, it's made by a guy who has the power to make a film that he wants to make, who has the power just to do what he wants to do. Which means, like, if it was a normal situation, he just hadn't made a massive hit, he would have been told that first third is so long, especially the theatrical. It feels long in the theatrical version, actually. In the extended version, it feels a bit better, because they actually add a bit more, but it makes it feel shorter because it works them in the mood better. But in the theatrical, it feels really long. It feels like there's such a build up to an event that doesn't really need it. I mean, it is like you're just trying to get people into a boat to go to Skull Island, but they have to go through what the theatre was like, world that like that time, how everyone was starving, how the problems of Carl, the producer, Carl Denham, the producer, and then you have to get on the boat, and then where you're on the boat, you have the love story between the Anne Darrow character and Jack Driscoll, played by Adrian Brody and Naomi Watts, and all that stuff expanded from what was a scene or two in the original per story beat to something that goes much longer. All these atmospheric shots of the ship and all these weird shots of what's going on and how the ship's going on. All these stories about the seafaring wage with Jamie Bell in a supporting part that doesn't really add up too much of anything, but it's just there. And it just goes on and on and on. In the extended version, because you know it's a longer film, it kind of works a lot better because they add a bit more and it feels like it's what the director kind of wanted this whole section to be, which works fine for me because it's just a mood thing. It is self-indulgent. I mean, at no other time would Peter Jackson be allowed to do this in a big budget movie. He was given a lot of leeway with this thing. But I can see if people hate the film, it's probably that section and that kind of melodrama. There's some melodrama stuff there that's painful to watch, even the extended version. And some of the acting's way over the top, but it's stylized to be over the top because it's based in the 30s and it's very self-indulgent and weird and odd and crazy. But I like it still. I mean, there's still some really weird shots going through the ship and through the bills of the ship, and all this Andy Serkis being this crazy kook. You would Thomas Creston's the captain who does not trust Jack Black as Denham at all. You would Colin Hanks as Denham's sidekick, the only one with a conscience. You have this whole crew of Denham's crew, who in the old film were just crew members. In this one, they are. You all got their little story, and it all becomes this epic thing where every character getting their moment, like you would in a TV show. So, it's expanded more in the extended, which means you actually get everyone to get their little moment, which basically means that it feels more of a piece. In the theatrical, it feels like most people got their little moment, but they cut a couple of them out, and it felt kind of very jaggy as a film. Which the theatrical did feel like generally. But in the extended, it feels a bit more normal and of a mood, or a film that a director wanted to make. Eventually, they get to Skull Island, and that's when the film takes off, especially in the extended version, because that's when you're going to get to Kong. And Skull Island itself looks crazy. It looks like something from a cannibal movie from the 70s. Like Jackson just went into his whole horror rich with this one. All the people, all the villagers in this one are starving to death. They're dangerous. You should not mess with them, and they will kill you, and they don't care. And as soon as they see Anne Darrow, they think, okay, we're going to use her as a sacrifice to Kong to keep him happy. I mean, you get all this other stuff, like how Jack Black's investors are wanting him arrested and taken back. You've got all this stuff with the captain and all the rest of it. But you've got this main thing of these natives want Anne Darrow for Kong, and they're going to kidnap her. And there's a great sequence going through the ship while a storm's going on, and it works really well. That whole section, when you get into the villagers, it's pretty hardcore for a PG-13 film, and it's really enjoyable if you like a kind of rougher kind of movie, which you're never going to see again in this film. But it's a nice bit where you go from the romantic elements suddenly to a zombie cannibal movie. Then when Kong shows up, of course you see him in shadows for a bit because you need to build him up. But as he comes into it, the film starts to find some focus into an adventure story. That's what it's all meant to be, but it's taken so long to get there. I think some people are exhausted by the time you get there, because I think by the time you get there, it's like 50 minutes in, and it's like, I came for an adventure story, which I thought would come in about 20 minutes in or something, and I've taken this long to get there. And that's the biggest problem with the film, is it takes forever to get to the film that people want to see. Like Lord of the Rings never did that. I mean, they had a slow opening, but it felt you were building up to this world, and you would get introduced bit by bit to it. And this one, it's like we can know what the world is, we just want to get to it, and it takes forever to get to it. And I think it's a defect of Peter Jackson's directing style for this story. Because he's kind of like John McTiernan in a way, when McTiernan's another one who starts slowly in world builds. Even though there's a narrative going on, he's slowly building his world at the same time. So that's why a lot of his films do feel that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and things, and that's what he's good at. Which means if he's doing a fast-paced story from the beginning, sometimes it feels like the pace is a bit off. Peter Jackson's the same way. Maybe you look at this, or you look at Last Action Hero by McTiernan, there is a kind of feeling this film should be paced quicker, but it's not, because the director loves all the details and will slow everything down to get all these details that no one gives a damn about. Apart from someone like me. So we have this narrative that is taking its time, but you're getting towards the atmosphere, you get all the atmosphere, you get towards the story, and eventually you get there, eventually you get to Skull Island, and you get into the monsters, into the dinosaurs. You kind of want to see Kong fight dinosaurs, you want to see the dinosaurs on the island, which you only see briefly in the original, and you don't see it all in the first remake with Jeff Bridges. You finally get this, and that's one of the problems with the theatrical, is because it's a story of Kong, they cut out a lot of action scenes they had with the crew trying to rescue Andaro. So you miss a lot of the dinosaurs you really want to see, and it does feel, to me at least, like you're missing a lot of the atmosphere you wanted to see, because something they're in a race to get to the ending, or they're getting to the race to get to Kong scenes. So a lot of scenes are cut out, so the extended version is much more interesting, because you get way more dinosaurs, you get way more monsters, and you get the sense of them going through hell. It's because the narrative goes from the people on the ship rescuing her to her with Kong, rather than we go pretty much go straight to her with Kong, and the crew are following and are less important, and narratively they don't feel as important as they did in the original film or in the extended cut here. And the person who gets the most from this is Adrian Brody, his Driscoll, because in the theatrical cut he seems to appear and disappear in a really strange way. Like, he's important for one moment, then he's unimportant during the middle of the film, and then he's kind of important at the end, but not really, and it just feels like half his performance is cut out. Then you see the extended cut, and it's like, yeah, half his performance is cut out. It makes much more sense now. Like, his decisions make more sense. You see him pushing everyone through the jungle. Because you've seen a bit more of an extended version, the early bit, it makes more sense. Everything feels more motivated. It's works better. Plus, the action scenes you get here with the crew are much more fun. Like, they're on the boats, and they're getting attacked, and it's just that you get to sense Skull Island, what Skull Island should be. I mean, if nothing else, the reason why it's extended version is because of Skull Island. You get to see much more of it. You get to see what it is. You get to see the dinosaurs. You get to see all these weird monsters. It's like they actually managed to. The fact that they're giving Jackson all this money to do this thing and be self-indulgent pays off here, because he really goes for it. Especially when you see it in 4K, you see all the details of all the monsters. It looks gorgeous, and it really delivers. I mean, it's a wonderful monster movie, but especially the extended version, because that's where you see all the monsters. Another version, it feels like a cut down version of the monsters, and the extended version you've seen much more of the monsters. But you still get the importance of the Andaro Kong story. Kong is always comes back to Kong, and Kong's still the best creature in it. He's the motion capture with Andy Serkis playing him, and like Serkis doing Gollum, it's great. You feel the emotion of him, you feel the pain of his existence, and you get a sense of Kong as a character. So he always dominates. You never ever have to worry about Kong not dominating his own film. He always dominates. He's like a sad creature who you don't want to mess with, and the fights with Kong and the dinosaurs are astonishing. They're just so good. They are way over the top, and they are almost like a fanboy version of what you want to see after having seen the original film. But it doesn't matter, because it's a fanboy film. And basically, Naomi Watts is really good as Andaro. She's much more empathetic than any other heroines from the other versions of the film, and she really senses Kong as a lost soul. I mean, some people like Kim Newman criticised the film for actually because it was a fan film, because he points out in the original Kong, one of the things is her character never gets it, why Kong's attracted to her, which makes Kong's tragedy more even deeper, which is a valid criticism, but it still is still a new version of it. So you might as well do a different thing, and I think that's worked really well. This idea of these two lonely, misunderstood souls connecting, and how she's kind of missing that connection with Driscoll just through bad luck and bad human choices. But it works really well, and Kong is great. Kong, you really sense he really is the king here. He's the guy who no mess with. The dinosaurs will try and mess with him, but he will take them down. And all the other dinosaurs, all the other creatures, you've seen in my background, you got some of the more beautiful, peaceful dinosaurs. It kind of is a fantasy version of Jurassic Park, where all the creatures are kind of like that, but not. There's some fantastical version. You get kind of raptor-like creatures. You get all these different creatures in there, but they're kind of more fantastical. And it just works really well. And it is beautiful. It is a wonderful area of the film. So you have the human characters, they're fine. I mean, Naomi Watts is the best thing in it, by a mile. Adrian Brody is good in the extended cut. In the theatrical cut, he just feels like out of place. But in the extended cut, the character works a lot more. Because, I mean, the big thing about the character is his determination, which you don't really see in the theatrical. But then in the extended cut, it makes much more sense, and everything he does now makes sense. Where before he was this character, never quite came together. The one character that divides people is Jack Black as Carl Denham, because he's a showman from the original, but he's also a lot more selfish, and he's much more Orson Welles and egotistical and callous with people. And Jack Black does play him very broad, but probably a bit too broad for most people. I like it because the character is a show off. The character is self-aware of his own kind of evil and craziness, and everything is kind of a show with him. So I think the actual theatricality and falseness is actually accurate to the character, but I can see why it annoys some people. But I think if he'd done it understated, it actually would have felt weird as well. I think it was just the way the character was written had to be done a certain way. They chose the right actor, but it was kind of off-putting to a lot of people, and that's just the way it goes. I like the characterization, but I can see where people don't. I mean, you get other characters like Kel Chandler's like movie star, who's a B-movie star, and he's having a lot of fun, and he's in King Kong vs Godzilla, so he's in two different versions of Kong movies. And Jamie Bell is a kid on the boat. It's good fun as well. But again, in the theatrical, it does wonder why is he here. In the extended, it feels much more natural. You get a few more scenes, and it fits in better because it's a longer running time, and the narrative feels like it's loopier and going back and forward, and going through the island. So when you see the extended version of those characters chasing after Kong and Andaro, their inclusion makes more sense. What they do makes more sense because they're there for a longer haul, so it does work. In the shorter version, you feel like they're introduced, then they disappear for so long. It's like, why were they there in the first place? It's that kind of problem the film has. It just feels like the theatrical always had too much material, and never quite knew how to do with it. An extended version, it feels much more natural. But the characters work to a degree, but they are cliches. They are overdone caricatures. I mean, the funny thing is, the film it reminds me of a lot is Brain Dead, the Peter Jackson film with the zombie mother, and it was a really campy thing. And this film feels like it's made by the same directors. Peter Jackson going back to Brain Dead territory with this one. I don't think people understood that, though. I think people never got that that's what he was doing. They never understood the earlier Peter Jackson. That Peter Jackson made these weird films, and he was going back to that a little bit. And I think it just was like, what the hell was that? Because I knew his early films. To me, it was just he's come back to his other stuff. In some ways, to me, it was never a problem, but for lots of people, it was. But I had a lot of fun with the characters. They were over the top. They weren't very deep. I mean, the only person with any real depth is nobody watches the character. And most of that is done almost like silent movie acting with her and Kong and her kind of relationship with this big brute. First been scared of him, then slowly learning to trust him, and then a bond growing with them. But that's not. That's a completely different style of acting. It's still an old fashioned silent movie type of acting, but it's a different feel. And it works so much better. And I think it's the thing that gets people through the theatrical cut. You know. But it is kind of the heart of the film. It is the thing you really need for the film. But theatrical, it did feel that there's so much going on around about her that weren't needed. So, that's the kind of issue. The theatrical cut's actually the kind of weirder cut of the film. Finally, we get to the ending, which is Kong in New York, Kong fighting the planes, Kong being shown to the world, rebelling, escaping, and finding Anne, and then crawling up the Empire State Building and getting shot down with the planes. This works well, but I don't think it's as effective as the Skull Island stuff. I think it feels a bit compressed, because there's also a melodramatic bit with the characters that make no sense. And it pulls you out when you need to be getting really into it, because there's a bit where Anne and Jack fall out for some reason. It never quite makes sense in the script. And it's just one of those melodramatic things. Even in the extended cut, it's like, why is this here? It doesn't make sense. Because she blames him for helping them catch Kong, but it's kind of obvious he wasn't doing that. And it's like, it makes that character look really stupid. And it's a melodramatic thing that does not work. It really gets in the way of the film. But that's how it goes. It's a bad idea, and it's like, nothing ever made it work. It was just a terrible idea. And there's a lot of action here. There's a lot of fun where Kong's trying to find a blonde, and he looks at the blonde, and it's not the one he wants, he throws it away, which is pretty funny. Enjoying him trash the place is very funny. Plus, he sees Adrian Brody and he starts chasing him down New York, which is great fun. There's a lot of good stuff here, but I think the predictability, know he's going to die, kind of goes against the enjoyment. I don't think they quite nailed the sequence going to the Empire State Building as much as the original did. But when they get there, when he finds Anne and starts to go up the Empire State Building, it comes back to life. It really works. You really feel the emotion of him understanding he's going to die. There's nowhere for him to go. And I'm trying to protect her. And the planes come to shoot him down. It is a beautiful sequence. It's not as good as the original. But no film ever could be as good as that original. But it does a damn good job. It really works. The music's terrific. The way it's shot is terrific. It's very romantic. Which was trying to build up in the beginning how romantic New York could be despite its problems. And that pays off here. But it's just one of those things where I think people could have worked it out with less time in the theatrical cut. But it still works beautifully. It's still a wonderfully haunting sequence. But this is a very flawed film. This is a very personal film for Peter Jackson. And he made it, and it was flaws and all. It was like almost like he made it really quickly after Lord of the Rings. I'm sure some of the things I think are problems with it would have been solved if he'd put another year to write the script and get it all sorted. I think they rushed through so quickly that there's certain things they shot and it was like, you should not have done that. But the stuff that works, the imagination in the middle section when you see it in full extended version, Kong himself, Naomi Watts in it, they all really work. They all really deliver. So it's worth that. It's worth watching it for them and going through the weaker points. And that's the big thing. If you're a film fan, do you mind obvious flaws in the films? If it annoys you, you're probably not going to find much here. If you can put up with flaws for the really good, for the gold, this film's for you. It is a beautiful film, but it's a beautiful, messy film. It's a lumbering mess of a film. I think it's gorgeous, but I don't think I'm the majority in this one. I think I'm in the minority in this one. I think people just view it as the self-indulgent follow-up from a big director, really, to his big hit. I don't think people love this one. I think everyone just goes back to the original and views this as another Kong movie. I think most people enjoy Kong Skull Island, the more recent one, over this one. And I adore Kong Skull Island, but this one has more soul to it. The other one's more of a popcorn movie. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it wasn't too rambling, because I could easily ramble this film, or any Kong film. I mean, I adore Kong. So this talk about King Kong is probably as self-indulgent as the film as itself. So that's appropriate. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another video.